Well, what do you say we move on to the main event
The
of
main event.
the article? I think was this the one that I sent us?
Yeah, it
It's
is. Um,
it's a monster article.
it really is.
It's at a GameStop, um, GameStop, no
GameSpot.
GameSpot,
Yeah.
Spot, GameStop won't stop. Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
I'll let you take the take the lead on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just for those on video, I'm scrolling the whole article right now. It's a
It's a
lot.
monster.
It's a lot.
Yeah,
Um, Definitely not gonna read the whole thing word for word, especially like some of the beginning parts, because it's most of the beginning is just a setup for kind of what's been happening in the gaming industry. We've been covering that already for months, so I don't really need to go into too much about how we got here, kind of thing. Um, you know, but I mean, there's thousands of jobs, like lots of layoffs going on. Um, Yeah, they talk about too, like, 2024 is like it's looking like it's gonna be worse than 2023 was in terms of layoffs and like these corrections, so it's not slowing down kind of thing.
yeah.
Um, they
The
talk
interest rates
too.
aren't probably going to come down until
Yeah,
the end of
yeah,
July or something. So
yeah.
that has a
Um,
lot to do with it.
yeah, they talk about the GDC State of the Games Industry survey that came out about live service and stuff like that, and kind of how that's.
Everybody's very
Um,
pessimistic.
um, yeah, it's a crazy time for sure. Um, and so again, I just want to kind of go over some of the main points, some of the things we may not have covered about reasoning behind what could be going on. And this article also has tons of interviews with, like, insiders and stuff like that. So it's an overall interesting read, and we'll have it linked below if you really like want to read the whole thing, because I think it's really cool. Um, but yeah, I'm just gonna go over a couple of kind of points here. So I'll start kind of at this section here. So for the people who play games, the situation is baffling because 2023 was a banner year for the industry with a huge number of acclaimed games seeing release. Um, this would suggest, at least to players, that the games industry overall is doing well, and its success should be shared by the people who make its games. By and large, revenues continue to increase for the industry. Games industry analysis company Newzoo estimated the market generated $184 billion in 2023, an increase of 0.6% over 2022. And apart from layoffs, many companies released seemingly healthy financial reports and made moves that didn't seem to telegraph trouble. Sony paid $3.6 billion to purchase Bungie in 2022. Microsoft's $70 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard was finalized in 2023, and EA spent $325 million on stock buybacks in the third quarter of 2023 before its most recent layoffs, and $1.3 billion on buybacks over 12 months. The recent heavy layoffs largely don't seem to come in service to keeping a company healthy, but are instead aimed at serving something else: the stock market. Getting into them, Mike.
Yup.
Oh man. Um,
Here it comes.
Yeah, there's a quote too from the article. The same companies that are saying they're making record profits are also letting us know they can't afford to keep us, making this make sense. Just make it make sense. Um, the main measure of success in today's economy is not profitability, but growth, and that is true in the games industry as well. Stock prices increase when companies report growth rather than conveying a company in crisis. Layoffs reliably correspond with a jump in stock price because firing people is seen not as a reduction in the company's ability to make money in the future, but as a reduction in overall costs. Tech industry commentator and EZPR CEO Ed Zitron refers to this as a rot economy, a system that favors the approach of growth over businesses being healthy and sustainable. You know about that rot economy, Mike?
Favors the appearance of growth.
Oh man,
That's the key word there.
it's that appearance.
I,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like we've lost all fundamentals.
Yeah. They talk about Embracer too. We can go into this a little bit. Embracer, known for its ravenous acquisition of development studios over the last few years, is an illustrative example of the growth-obsessed, stock market-focused approach to business. Embracer's quarter three financial report plainly states the company's main goal is to appease the stock market. The report suggests Embracer may see more layoffs as it tries to sell some of the studios it acquired over the last few years. Our overruling principle is to always maximize shareholder value in any given situation, the report reads. It's like, geez, dude. They're just going for it, huh? Buy all these companies. Now they gotta sell these
Yeah,
companies. Crazy.
they're just calling it out as they see it because that's kind of what it's been for a very long time now. It's all about the stock market and returning money to the investors, and it's just it's kind of lame, man. If you're like in the working class, you can't really buy a whole bunch of stocks. You're just trying to work and make a living wage, but instead of paying the workers that are putting in the work, they're paying the people that invested. It's like I get that to a certain degree, but it's like, geez, man. you're not even trying to be just good company with good products. You're just trying to
Uh,
appease investors all the time. It's lame.
yeah, it's crazy. So there's a couple sections of this article. We'll talk about this one. This one's a reality set in. It's possible to think about what's happening in the games industry today without the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. With so many people avoiding public places and events, the games industry saw an explosive increase in growth in 2020 and 2021. A 2022 report from PwC charts gaming's massive leaps from $162.4 billion in revenue in 2019 to $196.9 billion in 2020 and $214.2 billion in 2021. Yeah, certainly no surprise there. And I'm pretty sure I was aware like everyone was inside playing games for the most part, right? You just didn't want to go out.
Yeah.
In all entertainment, we saw just a mass spike in consumption, which required a lot of reaction as to like, how are we going to maintain this, maintain services, grow? Ben Cavalo, founder and CEO of publisher Midwest Games and former lead program manager of Netflix's game division, told me. And then a lot of people just jumped at the opportunity, and obviously we saw the amount of investment that went into games during the period was massive, and each company was hiring at rates that were unprecedented as well. Like we've talked about, we're hiring all these people, crazy. And there was overstaffing during the pandemic on the expectation that the games industry growth during those years would continue forever, but reality set in, and companies had to level set. That's what we talked about. That's what we mentioned. Overhiring to a point now.
All
Gotta
the
reduce.
time. Yeah. I feel like everybody has been overhiring or they had overhired in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Trying to steal competition from your competitors in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. So I'll read this a little bit too, because this kind of talks about your interest rates, Mike. It says Hansen also pointed to other factors that I don't even know, what is that word? Dovetailed? Dovetailed? Is that dovetailed? That is dovetailed. I've never seen it written before. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I've never seen it written before. I've just heard it. That's funny.
You know how you like see words for the first time, like legitimately the first time, or in a very long time, you have no idea how to pronounce it.
Yeah, like
Sometimes
I
that
had
happens
no
to
idea how
me.
to spell dovetailed, but I thought it was two words. I didn't realize it was one.
Sometimes I'll see like guarantee and be like, how do I pronounce that? Garn? You know what I mean?
Literally. Oh man. Okay. It's so funny. All right. This, by the way, we're talking about Lisa Cosmos Hansen. She's the president and CEO of analyst firm. Nico Partners. Yeah, Nico Partners is the name of the firm. So Hansen pointed out that other factors of that dovetail with the reduction of growth and demand for games. One of those is a sudden increase in inflation, which hit a 40-year high midway through 2022. Federal Reserve responded by increasing interest rates, which made it more expensive to borrow money. That drastically brought down investment in the games industry, since investors could get a guarantee of a high return off safer bets like treasury bills. Dude, we're getting economic.
Take your money somewhere else,
we're getting
dude.
economic. Like, investment in the games industry plummeted, according to capital analyst firm PitchBook. It fell from $14.6 billion in 2022 to just $4.1 billion in 2023. That was slightly higher than 2019's $3.8 billion, but a drastic difference from the highs of the pandemic, when investors had been enticed by increased revenues and the hype surrounding Web3 and metaverse technologies.
Crypto stuff.
Yeah, it's I've like Web3. It's like I like feel like I just forgot about that. It's like the whole Web3 movement.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It might come back depending on what happens with TikTok. That's my opinion, but we'll see.
Yeah. Absolutely crazy stuff. So they talk a little bit about that. I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. So, talking about profitability isn't enough. It's kind of another section of this. Venture capitalist and analyst Matthew Ball, wrote an expansive essay detailing his view on what is happening in the games industry. The piece runs some 16,000 words, covering the factors related to the pandemic, as well as a number of other elements affecting the industry. One of the factors Ball points to is that gaming wasn't just impacted by post-COVID bounce back. Revenues are down more than anyone expected. He said, quote, in the U.S., for example, gaming revenues is down 6.3% from 2021, $2.4 billion annually. Ball told me in an email, after inflation, the market has shrunk 15%, roughly $9.6 billion. No one forecast this decline, and instead, many executives, companies, consultancies, banks, etc., expected considerable growth. The result is that the games industry is quite literally tens of billions smaller than expected. Meanwhile, costs have surged due to inflationary adjustments, talent scarcity during the pandemic, competition with big tech, venture capital, and Chinese game studios, as well as much needed reductions in crunch. There's a lot of factors here, Mike. There's so much going on.
It's a worldwide economy now, so everything is basically pulling everything else in different ways that
Yeah,
we probably haven't ever seen before. So
probably
this
not.
is yeah, especially, the panty happened. So
The
that's
painting.
yeah, so when that happens, it's like unprecedented. Never it's wild. All of it is.
Yeah. Yeah, another thing that I
You
didn't
c-
even consider until I read this article was this next paragraph here. It said major contributor to that drop in revenue is the fact that the same number of people are gaming for about the same amount of time that they did in 2019. So it's like kind of like leveled out almost. It's like now it's kind of what
Yeah,
2019 was is
that's
now kind of the same. Um,
I feel like that's the same thing with different platforms too,
yeah,
like very niche platforms. Remember, I think I sent you the Devin Nash video back in the day about how Twitch was on a downward slope and was dying, and then during quarantine, it skyrocketed in popularity because
yeah,
everybody came back to watch games again and got big into gaming. But as you can see, that's not going to last forever. People have responsibilities, and you can't just be gaming and starting podcasts and talking every day about it.
yeah. Then you got
So,
us. We started post like technically we started 2022, right? It's like post pandemic pretty much. But hey,
yeah,
we're
I think
still
so.
we're still
Yeah.
kicking.
Yeah,
Honor.
we're going strong.
So while other entertainment businesses have also seen a reduction in their business from the heights of the pandemic period, they're still ahead of where they were before the pandemic, but gaming is not. So it's like really weird. Like I guess other industries are kind of cruising. Here we are. Um, the revenue pullback is partly, but far from just relating to COVID. 2019, 73% of Americans played video games, and they played for an average of 12.7 hours a week. By 2021, it was 76% at 16.5. Then by 2022, it was back down to 73, just 13 hours. Yet while most industries have experienced the COVID pullback, books are still up from 2020 to 2021. TV video is up, music is up, e-commerce is up. It's gaming that is the outlier. Think of gaming as a super high growth industry, but it actually falls short of the average industry and country's rate of growth. Is gaming growing, Mike? I don't know, dude. This report seems to
Uh,
think otherwise.
it depends on the metric, I think. I
Yeah.
believe that more people are gaming more than ever. I believe that more people are gaming on multiple platforms more than ever. And I think there's more cross platform, cross saves, cross generational games than ever before. And I also think there is an element to this where gaming is more socially acceptable than it's ever been before. And I think that goes
Yeah.
a very long way because not even 2014 people were making fun of you if you played video games. It really wasn't until the breakout of like Fortnite where everybody started playing games again. There are people in my
Exactly.
life that I know have never played video games before, and they've picked it up in the last like 5 years, which is wild. It's like you've been on this planet for 35 plus years,
We're taking
and
all
you
this
are
other
just
entertainment,
now.
and you're just now getting
Yes.
to the most engaging and interactive form of entertainment there is, arguably.
Yeah. And
Crazy.
you've been trashing it forever. And it's like they're always just like, oh my gosh, Star Wars is amazing. It's just like, what's wild is Jedi Academy. Let me introduce you to how to become a Jedi. Like just little things like this.
Have I shown you
In
Fallen
gaming
Order?
is
Then again,
yeah.
Fallen Order,
Oh
it's kind of like
yeah,
a,
yeah,
it's kind
yeah.
of a Souls like. So I don't know. You
It
probably
is.
they'd have to play it on easy, but it's still a fun game.
Possibly.
Um, but yeah, another thing too I didn't think about, but this is certainly I think got some like factors into it. It says we think that we think about the arcade era and the console era and the digital era, where most things are consumed and bought digitally. We're also moving into the ultra digital era of the cloud. That is going to be the next 5 to 15 years down the line. And I think a lot of companies are starting to prepare for it and they're adjusting some strategies off of that and rethinking about
Yeah.
things during this time period as there's this large shift. That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, we're at the cloud period, right? Like we're getting to that. So
Oh yeah.
it's, and like physical games, Xbox already reducing their physical department.
Yep.
They laid people off. It's like games are starting to ship digital now. You don't own anything, Mike, but I'm not going to get into that right now because that's a whole other like segment that I'm just,
Oh, I think we've talked about it so much on the pod that it's like I don't think we can do it anymore.
Please see our previous 2 episodes.
Yeah,
It's like,
seriously, went on a couple of good rants for that.
yeah. TikTok's coming out shortly of our rants.
Oh yeah,
And
like and subscribe.
like,
Uh,
subscribe. Yeah.
yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, you continue on.
Well, I was just gonna say, so we could go on the next section. So the psychological permission. I like kind of skim through this and read like most of it. So we're gonna start from the top. While the issues facing the games industry might explain why 2023 weren't as strong of a year as it appeared to be, they don't fully explain layoffs. After all, businesses have other ways of reducing costs and weathering tough periods than firing huge numbers of workers. It's also a lot of money to fire people, so there's that.
It really is. Yeah.
Carrie Kwok, I hope I said your name right, Carrie. I'm sorry if I didn't. Executive Vice President and Head of Gaming, Digital Entertainment, and Lifestyle Tech Public Relations firm Berlin Rawson, started working in PR for video games 20 years ago. She told me that at the time, layoffs would have been seen as a corporate crisis. Communications professional like her would have been hired to help manage messaging, protect brand reputation, and avoid consumer backlash. Heavily cutting staff was viewed as a last resort with potentially dire consequences. Ain't that right,
Nobody cares now. That's the crazy thing. Nobody cares, which is wild. Zero brand loyalty. Nobody cares about brands. Wild, dude.
It's shifted, huh? Shifted.
Yeah. Let's see what she says about it. Hopefully she has the same sentiment as I do.
Well, let's get into that. So she says, quote, fast forward to now, and I think there is some kind of normalization that's happening in our industry, unfortunately, where we're seeing, where you're seeing in major companies, they're doing it. And now, and you know, we're dealing with a very complex situation with the nature of our industry as well as the economics issues. When they're seeing every big player is doing it, you kind of feel like, okay, well, if they're doing it, I probably should do it. There's almost a herd mentality going on to a certain extent. I think it kind of gives every company in the industry almost a psychological permission, if you will. I didn't think about that too. It's like,
It makes sense.
if all these other companies are laying people off, like, you know what? Let's bite the bullet. We may not have to, but like, hey, if there's any time to do it, it's now, kind of thing.
Oh yeah, dude. Man, there's definitely a herd mentality because I don't think a lot of people really know what they're doing in some positions. I think they show up, they get a paycheck, they go home, and then they get promoted when they probably shouldn't sometimes. I mean, that usually happens with like bad management systems. And in this case, if you see a company like Microsoft with a very strong reputation of being a very successful company, or Apple, or any other tech company that's on a huge scale having layoffs, it's gonna make a smaller like studio just be like, oh crap, if Microsoft's laying off people, they have like all the analytics and like probably like crazy amount of PhD guys like just in the background data mining like the actual economics of
Cooking.
the world, and they're like, oh, I see what's happening in like 2 months time, we got to prepare for it. That's what they assume what Microsoft's doing, and meanwhile Microsoft's just like, man, we could have done better in like the stock, so you know what, cut them. Like, this is how we increase profits, get rid of employees, get the contract workers. So you never know why a company's really laying off because they never say it. Have you noticed that? They never
Yeah,
give a specific
They're
reason.
never straightfore about it. Yeah, it's just like
Exactly. Yeah,
They
it's just
give the
like, oh,
same
we had to
speech.
make changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, very vague.
Yeah. So there's a little more detail to that, I guess. Some companies might be facing a quarterly earnings report that needs a boost when facing shareholders, Quark said. And layoffs are a way of cutting costs to paint a rosier picture for them. And shareholder perception and pressure is a real issue. As well, seeing others cutting their costs can lead to investors pressing company leaders on why they're not making similar moves to stay competitive. Wow. That's crazy. That's insane.
Yeah,
Influence.
it's a very
shareholders.
selfish mentality.
Yeah.
A very selfish mentality, because if you get to that level of like, we need to cut people, do oh my gosh, like from a business perspective,
Yeah.
this is probably why I'll be a horrible business owner. But you shouldn't like, when you hire somebody and you're paying them, you're kind of responsible for them in a way. Like in the United States, it's like when you're hired, you get health insurance.
Yeah.
That is a huge deal.
Yeah.
Health
That's
insurance
game
and
changing.
retirement. Like, that's crazy. There's no safety nets here. So if you're not employed, you don't have health insurance. You don't have like the retirement fund going up in value.
Yeah.
And that's a very real risk. So if you're hiring people in the US, it's like you're kind of responsible for them in a way. It's like they're responsible to give you like work and stuff like that and productivity, but you're also responsible for their like well-being in a way,
Yeah.
in almost like a literal way. Because but they also have to do their job, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
It's wild how they're just like start calling up the CEO and just being like, "Hey man, listen, like I'm not getting like my extra million and I'm trying to go out to like some tropical island that you can't pronounce at the end of the year with my great great grandkids. So if you could just like fire an entire studio so I can do that, that'd be nice." Like, you know what I mean?
That'd
It's
be
just that's
sick. Like,
wild. Yeah, it's sick. Yeah, by the way, unemploy 600 people and good luck with them getting a new job and health insurance benefits.
dude.
Just nuts. Absolutely nuts.
There's more to this quote too. He said, "I think there's something to be said about tech industries normalizing this type of behavior and normalizing the, oh yeah, let's just lay people off rather than exploring every possible alternative before you just uproot people's lives." And I think it's an ethical question. And I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing so many people ready to just get organized in their labor. It's one reason
Easily.
among many others. Um,
Easily, dude.
yeah, it's crazy, dude.
Dude, I here's a bold statement now. I'm older than you, but when the 2006 to 2008 great financial crisis happened and everybody got laid off,
Yeah,
people that were working at companies for 20 plus years got laid off and they were left with like nothing, right?
yeah,
When that all went down, the like my generation of those were like our parents that got laid off or dads. I saw that and I was like, "Oh, I have zero brand loyalty to anybody now." Like that's
yeah,
it's a mental shift. And the same thing is happening. Like that's never really changed. It's like layoff
yeah.
after layoff after layoff. And now I think that's why you're seeing people only working at a company for 2 years and switching
There's so much turnover now.
constantly.
Yeah.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, there's people in my company that show up for like a month and they're off to a new one.
Yeah. I died. People
In and
show up at
out.
my company for like a few months, and then like
Yeah,
we
gone.
a client drops something like that, and they're just like, "All right, I'm out." Like it's like, okay.
Yeah,
Um,
see ya.
yeah,
It's wild.
it is wild for sure. And there's clients I work for too that they're laying off and letting go people that have been there 15, 20 years. It's like, oh, it's insane, dude. It's just insane.
Absolutely wild.
It hasn't changed. That's funny. Um, oh, oh, Mike, we could talk about consequences of games as a service. You want to talk about this? Oh,
Uh,
jeez.
very few successful ones that make all the money, and then a bunch of trash.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is.
Here we go. So the games industry has always been driven by hits, but with the rise of games as a service model, the biggest hits can stick around for much longer. That has created a situation where measuring the growth or revenue of the whole industry can tell a partial story because a large amount of the money goes to only a few games. That's another element of what's affecting the games industry now, Ball told me. Alongside the other factors is an ever increasing struggle for new games to break out. Ball sent an email. There were incredible financial successes, Helldivers 2, Power World, but the list of unsuccessful, canceled, and bombs is frighteningly long. This had led many publishers to reassess their development pipelines and incubation projects, often canceling games outright or significantly reducing their budgets. This leads to talented developers without a budget to work against, and at a time where other titles at their parent company are being pared hardback too, underpinning the challenge, the fact that the largest games, Fortnite, Roblox, Call of Duty, GTA, PUBG, FIFA, continue to grow and strengthen, leaving little space for others. In his essay, Paul called this effect ossification of the industry. A tendency that it is to harden against the biggest, most entrenched games. Those games put consumers into walled gardens owned by certain companies, and the more time and money they spend there, the tougher it is for them to leave and play something new. Every dollar you spend in Fortnite, for instance, is a dollar that's not going to another game in the industry, but it's also a dollar that pressures you to keep playing Fortnite. The game
Yeah.
also gains from your presence because because if you're invested in Fortnite, it's more likely your friends will join you, get invested, and build reasons to keep playing. This enhances the player community within the game, drawing in more people who are likely to get invested and stick around too. Yeah, like it's kind of a thing I didn't think about, but he's definitely 100% true there. It's like,
Yeah.
in these bigger games, they keep the loyalty of their players, and then why look for another game when you're enjoying what you're playing?
Exactly. And that's a key point that he just said in the essay was if you're already there and you have a financial incentive to stay there, or whatever there is, the game community or whatever, you're going to be advertising for them, which is kind of like pays for itself, which is kind of nuts. It's like you're buying cosmetics in there to stay longer, and you have that incentive to keep coming back so you can show it off. And then you're advertising to your friends that you know in like real life or at work or wherever you see them or they're on other games. Like, hey, come over here and play Fortnite with me. And then the
Yeah.
first thing you do is like, yo, you like this game? Like, that's pretty cool, right? Okay, cool. Check out this gun skin that I got. It's pretty wild. Check this out. I can be John Wick in Fortnite. Like, and
Yeah.
it keeps people coming back. And then they're going to say the same thing. Oh, how'd you get that? It was just becomes a trend.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very true. Um, and they continue on a little bit. So part of the reason why we're seeing a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the games industry too is that the bigger you get, you kind of continue to get bigger and bigger. When the industry becomes more dominated by key players, it's harder for smaller studios and the indie studios to survive. So they have two choices: try to make it happen or get bought. It's just like there's two kind of like things there. Um,
Yeah.
it's in the same period we saw a huge amount of of additional investment in the games industry. Also saw a huge amount of consolidation. Um, Cavallo said he thought that consolidation was also a big factor in the current state of the industry. About $3.5 billion was spent on mergers and acquisitions in games in 2019, while that number has exploded to 122 billion in 2022. Apart from changing the overall landscape of the industry, one company purchasing another almost always leads to staff cuts and new leadership, eliminates redundant positions, and makes other changes. I mean, yeah, it's we talked about that with the Xbox layoffs too. It's a big reason is like, and a lot of people predicted that, and they were true of like, there's going to be
Oh, yeah.
layoffs when this goes through. So like, be prepared for that kind of thing. Um, I'm sure people working, there would probably have the same mindset of just like, all right, well, I need to start thinking ahead because it
Oh,
may not have my
dude.
job by the time this is done.
Happens every time with the acquisitions. You have people that are leaving that are just they'll come in to check out the new company culture, see how it changes if it does, because they were already on the fence. Try to get their money and get out if they don't like it.
Yeah.
It's just what it is. That's what happens. The natural thing that happens with acquisitions, getting rid of the
Yep.
redundancies.
Yep. Exactly. Little this is kind of I think it's kind of the last section, but they talk about short-term fixes for long-term damage. Um, Layoffs might help companies accomplish their goals and spruce up their books for quarterly reports, but they won't help the industry in the long term. Layoffs won't
Nope.
address the reduction in growth or change what it costs to make games, and has fewer people in the studio staff won't help make more games to sell to players. There is some hope that revenue challenges will force publishers to really address cost growth, which was outstripped revenue growth for years in PC console games and is partly separate from developer compensation. But rising costs and declining margins are also a natural outcome of the low to no growth categories as each participant works to gain share or attention. We need more players, playtime, and spending. Layoffs and fewer new games are unlikely to achieve this. Yeah, I mean, solid point.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
'Cause you can't really dispute anything you just said.
Yeah, really. All the long-term trends are in gaming's favor, but most industries experience periodic hiccups, and sometimes they can last a while. I don't say that to make light of the situation. There's an utterly awful number of lives and families affected by this downturn, and some talented developers will forever exit the industry as a result, and some great games will never be finished. But the industry's current ails will eventually pass. While the layoffs might not always create consequences for companies in terms of bad PR or fall in stock prices, they are hurting the industry as well as the people who are forced out of their jobs. Tougher to qualify effects like decreased morale among those who kept their jobs when others lose them, or the companies or the gaming communities are nonetheless likely changing the future of the industry in the short and long terms.
Yep.
Which, yeah, it's you don't often think about the people that are at the studios, like what that people that stay after a layoff happens. It's
Oh,
definitely not the
yeah.
same, right? So,
You change the culture when you start when you start laying out people that are very popular within the office that make the office a general nice environment to be in, to get you away from that, like, mundane thing. It's like everybody kinda rips on Bob that walks around to each cubicle and all he does is talk and like bother people. But that guy might have good stories that make maybe you're having a really bad Tuesday. He comes by and he starts talking to you about the game that happened over the weekend, and it could be a nice little relaxing thing to get you away from that mindset. It happens, man. You have bad days at work and you need something to distract you. So getting rid of people like that is the culture of the company. It's not always the best thing.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Also, again, we're almost to the end, but also a couple more points. Um, Something to think about too. A lot of tech workers, game workers are told or taught, actually conditioned, I would say, that hey, if you're a programmer, an engineer, or whatever, you're very independent. You can go anywhere. You can do anything. More and more, I think people are learning that it's not as easy as it sounds. I think
Heck no.
in the games industry, especially, like, I, yeah,
No, man.
it's
No, no, no.
yeah, it's
It's all
yeah,
about getting the work. That's the hardest part about like consulting work because you and I work in consulting.
yeah,
So to get clients is the hardest thing. Once
yeah,
you have clients that are steady and reliable, you're good.
yeah, for
But to
sure.
get your clients, that's the hardest part.
Yeah,
And
sales is
I'm
art.
sure
Yep.
it's similar.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. I'm sure it is too. I mean, continuing on, I'll say one of the challenges I see is just that people want to make the layoff situation simple. They want to point and say evil company, or they want to point and say COVID, or they just want to point and say a lot of things. But the reality is, it's a lot of factors, and it has led to a negative space. But what it should be doing for us is leading toward, well, how do we not get to this place again? How do we think? How do we think about things differently? How do we think about things more sustainably? How do we move from an industry that's considered hit driven to an industry that can be sustainable when we're operating at the right cost levels per game, and we don't and God, I'm losing my spot. It's like such a long paragraph. Um, and it's per game, and we don't just overly invest or overly risk. No matter what, we're in a creative space. It's a risky space, but we're risking everything when there are some things we don't have to risk as much. So I think sustainability is going to be a major conversation coming out of this. The all important infinite growth value by investors isn't achievable by everyone. Setting up the industry to reevaluate how large swaths of it can continue to operate without being beholden to demand for an arrow that always points up and to the right. Um, as Cavell points out, how do we not just be a hit driven business and actually get to the place where we can have sustainability where sustainability should be? I don't know, there's a lot of factors here, Mike. I think out of all this, and then
Yeah.
there's also a lot I kind of like just didn't read in the article. So again, I implore people to go and read the full article to get all the
Oh,
context.
absolutely.
But like those are kind of the main points of like that I like when I was like reading through it of like, oh yeah, this is like it adds a little more context that I didn't originally have to what could be the cause of these layoffs. And it literally is just a lot of things at once. That's kind of the big takeaway. It's not really just
Y-
one thing.
Yeah, I think I think the gaming industry is very new in a way. It's old but new because it's old because like by the date it came out in like the 80s gaming and stuff like that. You can get into board games or whatever. But in terms of being new, it's like it's ever changing with the economic climate. The technology is always new. So you get a new workforce in that's like more skillful or like just different things are going on with it. And I think everything that's happening in the gaming industry is very similar to what's happening in other industries across the world. And I think it might just be this is what the future is. It might be
Yeah.
in all industries going forward with just prioritizing perhaps the stock market, profit sharing, and then the company culture, layoffs. It's just it seems like you see it everywhere now. It's very tough. I just think that the tech industry is being hit by it so rapidly in the
Yeah.
last year, maybe 2 years, just across the board. And that's why we have a spotlight on it right now.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um yeah, and shout out to Phil Hornshaw. He's the one that wrote this article. He's the one that
Yeah.
put together all the sources and everything. Oh, I think it's a really interesting piece. So, again, probably a must read if you're at all interested in what the industry layoffs could be, like especially in the video games. But yeah, like you're saying to tech, it's like I don't know, it's been like this for over a year now, just like uncertainty in some aspects. So it's wild times,
Yeah.
Mike. It's wild times, dude.
Dude, not just tech, it's like startups in general, like sales, different sales force, WeWork, another good example of like new industries, just massive layoffs, new companies having massive layoffs. It's tough. And you and I can't predict the future, but I personally don't think this is going to be the end of it. I think there's going to be more layoffs going into the year.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, there is. It's the unfortunate reality this year, especially. It's not gonna slow down, so but it's just crazy to think that, like what was wild to me is, like, the how, like,